Lesson 16. Relative clauses. Icebreaker. A relative clause, also known as an adjective clause, is a group of words in a sentence that provides more information about a noun. It begins with a relative pronoun such as who, whom, which, that, or a relative adverb such as where or when, or a relative adjective such as whose, what, which, followed by a noun, and provides details that help identify or describe the noun. Examples: the book that is on the shelf is mine. In this sentence, that is on the shelf is a relative clause that provides more information about the noun book. It tells us which book is being referred to. The girl who won the race is my friend. Here, who won the race is a relative clause that provides additional information about the noun girl. It tells us which girl is being talked about. Relative clauses are used to make sentences more specific and informative, thus helping us provide details about the things or people we are discussing about. Here are some more examples of sentences with relative clauses. The car that is parked in front of the house belongs to my neighbor. That is parked in front of the house is a relative clause providing more information about the noun car. The woman who lives next door is a doctor. Who lives next door is a relative clause providing additional details about the noun woman. This is the computer which I use for work. Which I use for work is a relative clause describing the noun computer. The dog whose tail is wagging seems very friendly. Whose tail is wagging is a relative clause providing information about the noun dog. Last summer, I visited the city where I was born. Where I was born is a relative clause using the relative adverb where to provide details about the noun city. The movie which won many awards is now available on streaming platforms. Which won many awards is a relative clause offering additional information about the noun movie. Words that introduce relative clauses: who, which, that, whose, whom, where, when. Relative clauses are introduced with relative pronouns like who, which, that, whom, or relative adverbs like where or when, or a relative adjectives like whose, what, which, followed by a noun. Deciding which relative pronoun or relative adverb or relative adjective to use to introduce a relative clause depends on the intended meaning and the requirement of the sentence. Who, which, that. Who is used in relative clauses to refer to people. Example: the girl who is singing has a beautiful voice. Here, who introduces the relative clause who is singing. It describes a person, the girl. Which is used in relative clauses to refer to things or animals. Example: the book which is on the shelf is mine. Here, which introduces the relative clause which is on the shelf. It describes a thing, the book. That is used in relative clauses to refer to both people and things. Examples: the car that is parked in front of the house belongs to my neighbor. Here, that introduces the relative clause that is parked in front of the house. It describes a thing, the car. The person that I met yesterday is coming to the party. Here, that introduces the relative clause that I met yesterday. It describes a person. Omission of relative pronouns: who, which, that. In some cases, especially in informal speech and writing, relative pronouns may be omitted without changing the intended meaning. It usually happens when a relative pronoun serves as the object of a verb in a relative clause. It is known as a zero relative pronoun. Examples: the book, which, that, I borrowed from the library is excellent. The word that, which, in parentheses can be omitted and the sentence remains grammatically correct. The person who That I met yesterday is coming to the party. The word who, that can be omitted without changing the intended meaning. Whom, where, whose, when. Whom is a relative pronoun used to refer to the object of a verb or a preposition in a relative clause. It is used when we are talking about people and is often used in formal writing. Examples: the student whom the teacher praised got an award. In this sentence, whom refers to the person that the teacher praised. The woman whom we met at the party is a famous author. Here, whom is used to refer to the woman we met. Where is a relative adverb used to indicate a place in a relative clause. It helps provide information about the location or place where something happened or exists. Examples: the park where we had our picnic is beautiful. In this sentence, where tells us the place where the picnic took place. The city where I was born is in Karnataka. Here, where provides information about the place of birth. Whose is a relative adjective used to show possession or ownership. It is used to introduce a relative clause that provides information about the possession of something by someone or something else. Examples: the girl whose bag was lost found it in the classroom. In this sentence, whose tells us that the bag belongs to the girl. The car whose tires were flat needed to be repaired. Here, whose indicates that the tires belong to the car. When is a relative adverb used to indicate a time, day, date, month, year, etc. when something happens. Example: the day when India became free cannot be forgotten. Here, when tells us about the particular day India became free. Preposition at the beginning of a relative clause. In some cases, we place the preposition at the beginning of the relative clause instead of at the end. This can make the sentence sound more formal or literary. Example: the house in which I grew up is available for sale. Here, we place the preposition in before the relative clause which I grew up. This way of framing the sentence is traditional and considered formal. The house which I grew up in is available for sale. Here, we place the preposition in at the end of the relative clause which I grew up, making it sound a bit informal. Watch out! Please note that a relative pronoun can be omitted only when the preposition lies at the end of the relative clause. The house in which I grew up is available for sale. The house in I grew up is available for sale. Wrong. The house which I grew up in is available for sale. The house I grew up in is available for sale. Right. Defining and non-defining relative clauses. The relative clauses that provide essential information about the noun they modify are known as defining or restrictive clauses. These clauses do not use commas to set off the clause from the rest of the sentence. Examples: the boy who is wearing a blue hat is my cousin. The book that I borrowed from the library is interesting. In these examples, the italicized relative clauses are essential for understanding or identifying the subject being referred to. Without these clauses, the sentences will make sense, but the identity of the subject will be unclear. The relative clauses that provide extra or non-essential information about the noun they modify are called non-defining or non-restrictive clauses. They add additional details but do not change the core meaning of the sentence. These clauses are separated from the rest of the sentence by commas. Examples: my friend, who is a great artist, painted a beautiful mural. The Eiffel Tower, which is located in Paris, is a famous landmark. In these examples, the italicized relative clauses provide extra information about the friend and the Eiffel Tower, but are not necessary for understanding who or what is being referred to. Joining sentences with relative clauses. We can use relative clauses to combine two or more sentences to make our writing more concise and coherent. Let us see how to do it. Identify the noun that occurs in both the sentences. Look for a noun that appears in both sentences and that you want to provide more information about. Example: Sentence 1. The book is interesting. Sentence 2. I borrowed the book from the library. In this case, the common noun is the book. Choose the correct relative pronoun. Select the appropriate relative pronoun who, which, that, based on whether you are referring to a person, a thing, or a quality of the noun. Let us continue with the example mentioned previously. Since we are talking about a book, which is a thing, we will use the relative pronoun which. Create a relative clause and use it to combine the sentences. Write a relative clause that provides more information about the noun using the relative pronoun you choose. Place this clause after the common noun in one of the sentences. Example: The book which I borrowed from the library is interesting. Knowledge gained. A dependent clause that is introduced by a relative pronoun, adverb, or adjective is usually called a relative clause. There are two types of relative clauses: defining, restrictive, and non-defining relative clauses. Relative clauses can join two sentences just as conjunctions do.